what kind of lifestyle, what quality of life can people expect in some of these countries?
Despite things changing, there's always opportunities that are so much better than all these Western countries that are just charging us 50% of what we earn. If you're not 100% into getting into the EU, both can be very interesting from simplicity standpoint.
Certainly, yeah, within that group, there are definitely some advantageous programs, countries to look at. I think I've visited quite a few of them as well.
Especially they do have really advantageous regimes whereby if you earn up to 80,000 euro a year, you can actually exclude from taxation about 40% of what you make. The number one thing that I really want to get across to everybody that I work with is
this episode contains discussion of personal and corporate tax. The information shared around these topics is for informative and educational purposes only and is not meant to be taken as professional recommendation. Any decisions you take are your responsibility alone, and it is strongly advised to do proper research and consult a professional opinion where applicable.
Welcome to episode 23 of the Multinational Money Podcast.
Welcome back to the Multinational Money Podcast. I'm Johnny, your host, and if you're interested in pursuing financial freedom, expat life, and making the most of global opportunities, then this is your podcast. Today I'm joined by Marchela Georgieva, who is originally from Bulgaria, moved to the UK for her studies, and then went on to work with PwC for 8 years as a tax advisor before deciding to leave the corporate world, relocate, and help digital nomads and expats relocate and optimize their taxes around the world. And in today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about Marchela's journey and her learnings, as well as some of the countries that her clients are moving to, with a lot of them being in Eastern Europe. So I hope you enjoy this episode, guys. And with that said, let's get right into it. All right, Marchela, welcome to the Multinational Money Podcast.
Hi, Johnny. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. We had to reschedule this a couple of times, but finally we're here and we are ready to discuss taxation, relocation abroad, and how to be a wealthy nomad, as is the name of your business.
Yeah, I'm excited. Let's jump in.
Great. Yeah. So maybe we could start with an introduction of who you are, what you do, and a bit about your background as well.
Yeah, amazing. Sure. So my name is Marchela. And I've been an accountant for over 10 years now. So I'm originally Bulgarian, but I spent most of my adult life actually in the UK. So I moved to the UK fresh out of high school, and after uni, I essentially moved to London, where I spent the majority of my career before becoming nomadic and starting to do my own thing. So I was in taxes for the majority of my career. I was in private client tax, or essentially I was working for a company called PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is one of the big four accountancy firms in the world. And I was based out of London and working for essentially the millionaires and the billionaires of the UK at the time, which was incredibly interesting and ridiculously complex work, which actually set me up super well for what I do right now, because I'd like to believe that none of my clients right now can be as complicated as my clients were back at PwC. So that was a very good stepping stone. But in a nutshell, 4 years ago, I got a little bit frustrated with how life was. I was working obviously in this massive corporate, earning really good money. But then when it came down to looking at my after taxes money, and actually because in the corporate world back then, they were really trying to buy us into the promotions and how life is really going to change once we held this and that promotion. And the money was really great, but unfortunately, after I was looking at the after-tax figures, things weren't really moving very much. And so I was getting a little bit frustrated as to how much I was working, evenings and weekends, and my whole life was essentially work, which I loved, but still, it just was not tying up well to the bank account. And so I started getting a little bit frustrated about that. And on the other side, I just wanted more freedom. At that point, I was almost 8 years in London, almost 12 in the UK. And I was starting just to itch a little bit more, to have freedom, to be able to travel, to just take my laptop and work from whatever I wanted. And PwC being obviously the big company that it is, it wasn't as open to the idea as it is right now, actually after COVID. So the financial side on the one side and the freedom bug that I wanted to go and pursue is what actually triggered me to leave the corporate world 4 years ago. So I decided to leave the company that I was working for. I decided to ditch the UK tax system because I was paying ridiculous 45% of tax, and it was just too much, like over the top too much. But obviously, as an employer at the time, I just had no control. I had to be happy with it or decide to just leave the system and do my own thing, which is what I eventually decided to do. And so 4 years ago, I set up my company. I transformed my tax situation and essentially became location independent, which has meant that I now help people who are very similar to you and I, who are location dependent or able to be location dependent if they wanted to really kind of do the same. So teach the countries and the tax systems that are so limiting and so costly, that are essentially taking 40, 50, 60% of tax of the money that they make, and to really lower that down by exploring options literally across the world. We're just so privileged to be independent from any location that me and my clients are really digging a lot into this to essentially find the opportunities that are so much better for their taxes, their lifestyle, and essentially their goals, to really find out one country where they can be so much more aligned, and we can shift things around from their high tax home to a place that is just so much better financially and lifestyle wise. And that's essentially what I help my clients with nowadays with Wealthy Nomads.
Yeah, I like the way you framed that, because you said there was two things you could do. Because, a lot of people, like, they might get to a high earning position and they think, this high tax burden is part of what comes with it. But then you're saying, okay, there is a way out, and, it's not necessarily for everybody. Not everybody will be able to leverage, but there is a way out if you do want to look into it and explore it. And there are options to get set up around the world in different countries and optimize your taxes a little bit. Yeah. So I really like the way you framed that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. And coming back to your experience in the corporate world, what are some of the biggest lessons, either from your work experience or from working with clients, that you've taken along with you today?
Very interesting. So obviously my clients back then were the ultra net worthy. So they were, like I said, the millionaires and the billionaires of the UK. Well, actually, there were people who had some sort of a touch point with the UK. So they could have been Brits, there could have been people who were like the so-called non-domiciled people who were not born in the UK but had either some income in the UK, or they were moving to the UK or leaving the UK. So some sort of touch point to the UK. And what actually really stood out for me is that all these people, because they were so high net worth, they were very much on top of their taxes. So they obviously had us as the company who was overseeing it, but they were just so invested in making sure that whatever decision they make financially for their lifestyle, they were consulting us as their tax advisors for absolutely every single transaction. Like every single life change that was going to impact their taxes and their net worth, they were straight away on the call with us, trying to make sure that it is the right decision to make at the right time. Because ultimately, what a lot of people actually don't think about is the taxes, as dry and as unsexy as they are, they really do impact our financial freedom and our independence and wealth so much more than almost anything else. Because if we're thinking about people who live in the Western countries where most of my clients come from, we're talking about tax bills of 50% and more. When you put together all the corporate, personal, national insurance, or social security, whatever equivalent that would be, it's a massive amount of money that goes out every year to taxes. And a lot of people just kind of accept it as the norm, but actually the people who I used to work with back then, that was one of their primary goals, to optimize on a daily basis. Like, it wasn't something that they look at every year. It was something that they think about every single time they make a transaction, or they think of making a transaction, because it just impacts their whole wealth. So that was something that was very striking for me, especially starting up, because I just didn't have the background at the time, like at the very beginning. And it was just so striking to me just to understand how invested these people were in their wealth management, and what a crucial part taxes were taken as in part of that. So that's the number one thing that I really want to get across to everybody that I work with. The taxes are not something to think about, once a year when you get this chunky bill and you kind of forget about it. But it is something that especially if you haven't yet sorted out your taxes to minimize it and go to a place where taxes are super low or they're none, it is something that you have to think about with almost every action that you take, because the impact on taxes could potentially be so big that it just diminishes your financial power, which is obviously something that we all want to be running away from and not towards. So that's the main thing I would say that I learned from, especially from my clients. And I guess the other thing that definitely triggered what I do now is just how many options there are out there. So even back then when I was at PwC, we would constantly work with different PwC offices, and it was just so interesting for me at the time to just realize how many options are out there, because a lot of my work back then was to map out for all my UK clients where else in the world they could go that is better for taxes, better for their families or whatever their lifestyle was at the time. And even back then when people didn't have the flexibility that we have right now in terms of location, people were already exploring ways that they can legitimately reduce their taxes, even within the frame of, a traditional lifestyle. So nowadays, obviously, when we have just literally no borders, like we can do our work from anywhere, it's just so important to get the message across that anyone who's able to do their work from literally from anywhere should be exploring their options, because there's just so many opportunities out there. And of course, things are changing. Of course, legislation is changing all the time. Immigration rules are changing all the time. So nothing is here to stay for, forever. But despite things changing, there's always opportunities that are so much better than all these Western countries that are just charging us 50% of what we earn. So I do want to, a big part of what I do actually is just getting that message across. Like, think about it, try to optimize it, explore your options, and just see what's out there. And if you struggle and you can't find the right fit place for you, just, get some help to get you figure it out, but don't just put it under the rug and wait for another year, because another 50% of income will be gone just by not essentially exploring. And it's a shame, because obviously if you can keep another 80% of what you otherwise would have spent on taxes, life can definitely change quite quickly. And that's actually what I geek out on so much. See how much people are changing their lives and how much money they're making and what they're doing with it, retiring early and buying their dream properties. And that's the stuff that I really geek out on, because it just changes lifestyles. And it's just so powerful to witness and just be a little part of it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, definitely. I think, I relate exactly to what you said. The later you leave something, like the more likely it is that conditions will change or opportunities will disappear. So, obviously it's something that needs careful planning and thought and decision making, but it's not something to, put to the side. It's something to consider. Yeah, whatever that is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're a big proponent, Marchela, of Eastern Europe as an attractive destination for digital nomads, for expats who are looking to relocate and optimize their tax burden. We've obviously talked about, a couple of countries in Eastern Europe that could potentially be attractive. Can you tell us a little bit about them and what makes them so attractive?
So the region is definitely becoming quite interesting in a sense that there are still quite a few advantageous programs within Eastern Europe, but also the quality of life compared to cost is still extremely reasonable. So in Eastern Europe, we have obviously countries like Hungary, we have Bulgaria, we have Montenegro, we have Albania, we have Romania. We could also, not quite Eastern Europe, but Malta and Cyprus are also sort of within that sort of time zone. So those are countries that people are moving to quite a lot as well. And what's interesting in quite a few of these countries is that you do have opportunities to benefit from really low taxes. So for example, you have Bulgaria, where you can have fixed tax rate, literally regardless of how much you make, whether you make 50K or 500K a year, the tax rate never changes. And that is phenomenal, because in a lot of other, as you would know from Spain and the UK, in a lot of the Western countries, the rates are progressive. So the more you make, the more you actually get to pay. And just having that simplicity in the setup is what attracts a lot of people to Bulgaria. So not only that, but Social Security is also really advantageous. We have Romania, where we have the micro regime, where you could potentially pay 3% of tax on your company profits. But what's interesting there is that, unlike Bulgaria, they don't cap Social Security. So Social Security in Romania is essentially paid on everything that you make, which can be a pretty big cost. And so Social Security is something that almost everybody overlooks a lot. And actually, it's a massive chunk of the tax bill at the end of the day. And so what I love about Bulgaria specifically is that they actually cap that amount. So essentially, the amount that you can get, that you can pay Social Security on, is more or less 2,000 euros, which is not, nothing, but at the same time, it can be very much optimized to be extremely low. And again, regardless of how much you make, you can never be charged on more than 2,000 euro a month, which is pretty amazing. So you don't really get that almost anywhere else. And so Romania has been interesting for a very long time, but they recently they did some changes that are pushing a few people away just because of how much they increased the health contribution, and just the regulation around Social Security and health contribution changed quite a bit. So it does push quite a lot of people down from Romania into Bulgaria. But nonetheless, the region is still quite attractive, with Albania still having its self-employment registration, where you have almost 100, about 100. Well, with the conversion, it always changes a little bit, but you do have about 100 and what's with the conversion actually? It's about 100 and, let's say, 50,000 euro a year that you can effectively earn, tax exempt, and afterwards you pay 23%. So if you are in that sort of bracket of income, it could be really interesting, because you could essentially have about 140, 150,000 a year that are completely tax exempt. So that's what attracts a lot of people to Tirana, especially because it's obviously it's becoming a very interesting hub for people who are location dependent, who want to do their own thing, and they're essentially looking for those opportunities where taxes are really advantageous, but also the lifestyle is quite interesting. Montenegro is becoming more and more interesting as well, even though being not part of EU of EU yet is still a bit limiting in terms of the community and how fast it's growing. But it can also be quite interesting if you have a local company. The bureaucracy is not too over the top, so it's not scaring off too many people. But I think Albania and Montenegro are quite interesting, but they're still not seeing too much influx of people, because most people who actually want to be in Europe, they do also want to be in the EU. And so we do have more people actually going further either towards Bulgaria and Romania, and actually Hungary and Czech Republic to some extent as well, if they are sort of in the up to 80,000 euro revenue threshold a year. Because especially Hungary and Czech Republic, they do have really advantageous regimes, whereby if you earn up to 80,000 euro a year, you can actually exclude from taxation about 40% of what you make, which is quite good, because you only pay obviously tax on the remainder. And that can be advantageous. Again, I always worry people to think about Social Security, because a lot of people just don't think about it, and they just assume that, oh well, if my personal income is up to scratch, and we've considered that's the whole bill. But actually, Social Security does come on top of that, so we just have to think about that all the time. Cyprus and Malta are still very interesting. Cyprus especially, I would say, because they've just made it so hassle-free to get in. Both as EU citizen, but also as a non-EU individual. Notoriously, the European Union has been not so easy to get into as a non-EU person. But Cyprus is still keeping its doors pretty open and pretty easy to get in, which has been really good. And I do have quite a lot of clients who've moved there and are enjoying the lifestyle in Paphos and Larnaca. And the good thing there is that you can also benefit from really low taxation of about 12.5 on a company level, and just 2.65 on any dividends. And the good thing here is that Social Security can also be optimized so well to essentially pay extremely low amounts, or actually none, depending on personal preference. So that's very interesting also. But actually what attracts most people to Cyprus is actually the residency rules, whereby you can essentially become tax resident without spending more than 2 months. And obviously for people like us who are quite mobile and just love the flexibility, that definitely works quite well. So I definitely say that Cyprus probably is a more popular choice than Malta. Bulgaria is definitely a far more popular choice than Romania, because often they are compared, like Malta is compared often to Cyprus because it sort of has a similar lifestyle. Bulgaria and Romania are often compared because they're obviously so close, and culturally they're not too different. But a lot of people would prefer Bulgaria over Romania nowadays with the change in the tax law and essentially just the instability of the tax code. It's been changing so much over the last few years and keeps on changing. And in the other Balkans, definitely Albania is one to eye a lot, because community in Tirana especially is growing really, really rapidly, and the capital in general is offering a very nice uplift infrastructurally, but also technologically. It's becoming a very interesting hub to check out, but also take advantage of their taxes. Otherwise, for sure, Hungary and Czech Republic can also be very interesting if you are within that 7,000-8,000 euro bracket. And if you are also excited to check out different areas of the countries apart from obviously Budapest and Prague, which are exploding in terms of cost. So, you know, every country and every place has its pros and cons, and some places that have really beneficial regimes, like for example Hungary or the Czech Republic, they do in some instances come with really high costs of living. So there are options, but it's just a matter of exploring a few that are going to be the ones that tick most of the boxes that you're looking to tick.
Yeah, that was incredibly well summarized, by the way. And I think the social security one is definitely something to keep an eye on, because at first glance, you know, something like Hungary, it's 15% flat income tax, but that social security, it's almost 13-14%. So already you're pushed up to like a 30% effective rate because of the social security.
Exactly.
Not of course accounting for the certain special regimes that you just mentioned as well, which may lower the tax burden a little bit. But certainly, within that group, there are definitely some advantageous programs and countries to look at. I think I visited quite a few of them as well. I've done videos on the channel for Albania, for Romania, for Bulgaria, for Cyprus. Hungary video may or may not be out by the time this podcast comes, but there is a Hungary video coming.
Nice. Amazing.
Yeah. So I mean, there's definitely options out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And no one fits everything and everyone. So it's a matter of just exploring and seeing where you're going to find your perfect fit.
I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Just want to take a moment to say that if you want to discover and explore some of the topics we've talked about in this episode in more detail, then be sure to check out my Global Financial Freedom course. From starting a side hustle, making money online, diversifying your wealth across borders, optimizing your taxes, and deciding where to relocate abroad, I've created a comprehensive and practical course to help you level up in all these different areas of life, giving you the chance to improve your personal finances and your quality of life at the same time. Check out the link in the video description on YouTube or the link in the episode notes on podcasting platforms to be taken to the course landing page. And with that, let's get back to the episode. You mentioned countries like Cyprus have a pretty accessible, visa routes to get to relocate, both for EU and non-EU citizens. So can you tell us a little bit more about the visa routes in some of these countries and how they compare particularly to the likes of, Western European countries like maybe Portugal and Spain that a lot of people have on their mind?
Yeah. So for sure, places like Bulgaria and Romania do not make it as easy to get in, especially as a non-EU. Of course, nowadays we have the Digital Nomad visa, and actually Bulgaria just recently approved its Nomad visa. So we're going to see what that's going to look like, because they've been trying to get it for a number of years, but they've been back and forth for quite a long time. So now it's confirmed that the visa is coming in, and that's going to transform a lot of things actually, because it used to be so hard as a non-EU to get in. You had to because in all these places you can't just buy property and get in, or at least not in Bulgaria or Romania, and so it was either quite bureaucratic options to get in and obtain visa D, which was primarily through registration of a trade representative office, which is essentially creating an entity of a foreign entity in Bulgaria or Romania in order to essentially prove that you become a representative of this foreign company in order to spread the word locally. So it sounds like a convoluted, complex thing, but honestly, it's just a lot of bureaucratic processes, to be honest, that essentially allow people from non-EU countries to have the right to remain. And so all these visas are usually for a year, and they're renewable every year up until you reach year 5, and you're then able to obtain permanent residency. So up until the digital nomad visas were available, that was essentially the only feasible route to get in. Of course, there's routes that are also out there for people who want to create companies and employ local people, and for those who are willing to invest large amounts of money in local funds. But I don't see them becoming very relevant or being very relevant to the people that I work with and essentially our community, because they're just a very specific type of investments, and a lot of people are not willing to take the risk. But I definitely see that the nomad visas are starting to get to bring us far more accessibility. I see this in Hungary a lot. Like a lot of people are moving to Hungary, especially with the digital nomad visa from non-EU countries, especially only, and that totally makes it possible to move, because otherwise it's for Hungary, for example, you'd have to have a company, and it's just this more complicated process of getting in and staying. So I definitely say nomad visas are the way to go, especially if you just want that flexibility and you're not actually that interested in the residency permit, because a lot of the times the nomad visas are actually not giving you the right to stay and for those years to qualify for permanent residency. So if you just want to essentially be able to stay in the country, but you're not too worried about permanent residency, nomad visas can be fantastic. And especially now with all of Romania, Bulgaria, Czech Republic offering those, that's a pretty easy way to get in. Montenegro is an interesting one, actually, because it's the one place where you can actually obtain a residency permit on the basis of having any property. It doesn't matter how expensive or what the value of it is, as long as you're an owner in Montenegro of a property, even if you have been extremely lucky to buy it for 1,000 euro, just on the basis of having ownership, you can obtain residency permit, which is fantastic, because I've never seen it anywhere else, and it really works. It really works. People are moving there, enjoying the lifestyle, having absolutely no problems renewing as long as they continue to be the owners of the property. And it definitely brings down the barriers to entry, because it just makes it accessible and possible without a lot of bureaucracy and without these complicated, super lengthy processes of applying for visa D and getting criminal record checks and all that extremely heavy process, if I'm honest, to get into the EU. Albania luckily make it very easy. I mean, they're not part of EU, so naturally there isn't that separation between EU, non-EU. And actually, as long as you're willing to have a local registration and just essentially register as a self-employed person, you're able to obtain a 1-year residency permit and essentially have the right to remain, which is pretty fantastic. So if you're not 100% into getting into the EU, both Albania and Montenegro can be very interesting from simplicity standpoint. Cyprus is also interesting, and I do have quite a few people moving there. And it's again quite as compared to Bulgaria and Romania, who definitely make it far harder to get in. Cyprus definitely makes it quite affordable in terms of cost, but also in terms of just how simple the process is. And as soon as you're able to prove, that you have sufficient funds, that you have stable income, that you are willing to commit to have a place in Cyprus and really make it your home, that you don't rent out, the entry to Cyprus can be extremely straightforward, actually. And even though obviously it's not part of Schengen, it still gives you the right to travel EU, and yeah, it's a very valid option for everyone who's looking for that EU residency permit without staying too long on the island if they wanted to, and without spending months on end trying to get in by applying for different visa D routes, which honestly take on average 6 months. So lots of different options, some of them extremely complicated and expensive, and others that are actually not too bad, like Cyprus and actually Albania and Montenegro as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to make the distinction as well between the non-EU and EU countries. Something I talked about in a previous episode with a lawyer based in Georgia is that she foresees if Georgia does join the EU, it will become more bureaucratic
For sure.
due to the need. So, like you
Yeah.
were saying earlier, Albania and Montenegro are an opportunity right now to perhaps
Yeah.
less
Georgia is
bureaucratic.
actually, Georgia is also a fantastic place that they did a lot of things right when it came to just attracting people. Like it literally takes almost nothing in terms of procedure to move there, which is such a no-brainer for anyone who wants to spend 6 months in Georgia. It's fantastic. Obviously a little bit far out from Europe if that's where people want to be spending the majority of their time, but for sure a lot of countries can learn a lot in terms of just attraction, because they brought down the barriers so fantastically, and for sure it works. They've brought in tremendous amount of people to Tirana and Batumi, to Tbilisi and Batumi, and economy is growing very well.
Yeah, Georgia is one of the destinations that I talk about in my course as well,
Cool.
and it's one that I definitely it exceeded my expectations, I should say, when I visited.
Yeah, interesting location and becoming more and more interesting, I'd say.
Definitely. So you mentioned obviously an affordable cost of living with a good quality of life in Eastern Europe. What kind of lifestyle, what quality of life can people expect in some of these countries?
Yeah, so definitely, I'd say variety is the right word for it. Because when it comes to lifestyle, all the countries that we talked about, almost each and every one that we mentioned has both mountains and the coast. So you have Albania and Montenegro and Bulgaria with the Black Sea, and Romania again with the Black Sea, and obviously Cyprus is the island, with Malta also. And so you have that small territory where you can very easily be in the mountains in the morning and drive for sunset to the coast, which is fantastic. It's that level of freedom and that level of diversity that really attracts, to at least from my perspective, from the people that I work with, people to the region, because it just expands what you're able to do within the country and also within very small distances. Because I think a lot of people really appreciate the fact that you don't have to drive for 10 hours, like for example in places like Asia, and you can still do a hell of a lot within the time that you have to spend in the country. So obviously in some places you might have to spend more time than in others, and so people obviously who like to travel like we do, we don't want to be stuck in the one place for too long. And so if the country offers just so much variety, it makes it so much easier to actually spend the time without thinking that your lifestyle is taking a hit in some way. So I do think that having very easy access to the mountains for skiing in the winter, or hiking and mountaineering in the summer, and just have the proximity to the sea to just enjoy water activities, or just have the very easily accessible places for holidays in the summer is certainly something that attracts a lot of people to the region. Like I see it especially with Bulgaria actually, and because obviously a lot of people move to Bulgaria for the taxes, but also a lot of them stay for the mountains and also for the sea in Greece, because Bulgaria and Greece are obviously neighbors. And so it's just so easy to just get on a car and just drive across the border. Obviously now Bulgaria is in Schengen. And so it takes like literally nothing in terms of effort or time to just drive across and go on the beach in Greece. And so that juice in the lifestyle is what just attracts people. Cost of life for sure is far cheaper compared to the majority of Western Europe. We have now a lot of different hubs in Cyprus, in Bulgaria, in Romania, also in Vlore, in Sarande, in Albania, where the cost of life is still at levels where you don't have to commit to a one-year contract necessarily to obtain really good rental prices, and also to afford really good quality of life in terms of activities and in terms of prices of restaurants and coffees and the millennial luxuries that we enjoy. So I definitely say that the cost of living is the one that still attracts people to a large extent. I do have a lot of people moving to other areas of the world, and when you compare just the cost of having things set up, like just from a pure company setups in immigration, but also just having the rental property and the monthly expenses, the difference is just still quite shocking. Even places now in Asia are becoming quite a bit more expensive because obviously there's quite a lot more people moving there now. And so Eastern Europe still is very, very competitive on cost. But I'd say the one thing that really gets people to keep on coming back to the region is the community. Like, it's definitely growing so fast. And similar to what they did in Georgia with obviously their advantageous tax regimes and bringing a lot of people pretty much at the same time, it's what a lot of countries in the region are doing now that just gets people hooked. People keep on coming back to the same spots. People are staying for either the summer months or they're staying for the winter months, and you have this community of people who will always be at that spot at that time, and it creates community is just the right word. And people, especially those that I work with, and I see it like again and again, people love to keep on coming back to the places where they know that their friends are, they know that they have someone to connect with straight away, and even though obviously you can do so much in these places in terms of lifestyle and activities and nature, the people and who you're able to find there is what I think gets people to keep on coming back to these places. Because ultimately, as much as we travel, we do want to connect with like-minded people who are running their own businesses, who are in love with the same activities. And these countries being so good for taxes, they do attract that type of community that keeps on coming back.
Yeah, the diversity is something that I hadn't considered, but it's probably a big strong point. And particularly countries like Hungary as well have very good transit hubs for flights as well. So flying between different countries. Trying to think, Romania I think is probably pretty well connected. Bulgaria as well.
Yeah, Bucharest is very well connected to the majority of Europe. And actually Dubai as well for travels into Asia. Sofia in Bulgaria as well. The islands a little bit less, but again with a connection to any major airport in Europe, you're able to fly out to either east or west depending on where you're going. So I definitely think connectivity is pretty good in the majority of these places. Maybe not Montenegro actually. Albania is also catching up. So Montenegro and Albania are definitely the ones that are a little bit less on connectivity in terms of just infrastructure. But I do expect that to change as more and more people are obviously moving there and demand is increasing. Yeah.
Yeah. And on Albania, even though this was 3 years ago, they still had e-gates in the airport for, a lot of EU and even non-EU passports, like a British passport where you could go through. So it's good in that respect too.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, even places like Serbia and Macedonia, they can be interesting for taxes, although from my experience, I don't actually have anyone moving to these areas. But for lifestyle, they can also be pretty interesting because especially with Macedonia, the area around Lake Ohrid is becoming extremely popular. So, but it's predominantly for people who go for short amount of times and they kind of check it out for a few months. But they don't really set up their tax residency there, even though taxes are actually are pretty good. But there's still not that community of people that are really going back all the time to really create that hub where people want to actually get set up and be based. To be honest, similar with Serbia, I don't see the community being very strong there, which I think is the reason why we're not actually talking too much about it today, because it's just not getting people that hooked to really stay and make it their base.
Okay. That maybe leads nicely into the next question. What about things like community, digital nomad hubs, other infrastructure like banking and ease of doing business in some of these countries? How is it generally?
Yeah, so definitely banking is being very revolutionized by Revolut to a large extent. I know a few years ago, places like Bulgaria, Romania, they were just not accepting Revolut in any way. It was just not part of the culture at all. And nowadays, most people who move there operate personally and corporate for their business purely through Revolut. And that definitely changes a lot the environment and accessibility and just ease of getting set up. There's also a provider called Paysera, which is a little bit like the alternative to Revolut, if you will, which also brings down the barrier to entry in the banking system quite a lot. Traditional banks definitely are an option as well. Not as competitive, of course, to the fintechs, but still, fairly decent option, especially, and even actually in places like Cyprus and Malta, banking is still pretty good in terms of accessibility and also pricing for bank account fees. So banking, I would definitely say that it is pretty good. Albania and Montenegro, of course, with a little pinch of salt, because they're not in EU, so obviously regulation is not as strict, let's say, because obviously EU is as strict as you can possibly go when it comes to banking regulation. So there's always that little aspect to consider when it comes to banking in those countries. But in terms of infrastructure, things are definitely changing in a big way.
Whilst we're on the topic of money, let me take a moment to tell you about Wise. Wise is a great option for those who are looking for a solution for multi-currency payments, banking, transactions with competitive exchange rates and low fees. Whether it's for personal use, maybe you're traveling abroad or you've got expenses in a different currency or in a different country than the one you're based in, or whether it's for business purposes and you need multi-currency banking for your business, Wise offers solutions in both cases. I've used about 7 or 8 different currencies over the many years that I've been a Wise customer, and I've used it around the world to travel and for personal expenses. If you're interested in signing up, be sure to check out the link in the video description on YouTube or the episode notes on the podcasting platforms. And with that, back to the episode.
I think a lot of people, when they hear Eastern Europe, they're thinking about sort of the Soviet time where things were really bureaucratic, things were not very digitalized, and everything was done on paper, and you weren't able to get decent Wi-Fi, and that is definitely history. Like even in the most remote places now in both Romania, Bulgaria, all over Cyprus as well, Wi-Fi is just not an issue at all. Like you can definitely work from anywhere. You have really good providers now, even for SIM cards. There's a lot of providers now that you can very easily even have an eSIM these days and just hotspot from places where you're extremely remote and you happen not to have connection. So for sure, infrastructure is there and enables anyone to work remotely and take calls, which is incredible, because it just means that we no longer have to be in the capital cities or the major cities to be able to do what we do. We can literally take our work to the mountains or to the nearby beach towns and be as effective and as productive as we can be in the big cities. And that definitely is what actually makes the HubSpot being what they are. Because a lot of us in the community, they actually don't want to be in the big cities for many reasons. And so just having that flexibility to work from anywhere is what creates these real odd sometimes HubSpots. For example, in Bulgaria, where I'm right now, I'm in a very small town called Bansko, in the middle of the mountains. Like it's a very small town of 7,000-8,000 people, and you wouldn't think of coming here to work. But it's got such a good infrastructure, it's got such a good community, that is the perfect place that in Bulgaria you wouldn't usually come here for work, but actually infrastructure is so good, and the co-working spaces actually are so fantastic and to such high level that it becomes a no-brainer option. So we definitely have a lot of places, and more actually of those places popping up throughout the region, where people can have a very good life, that they can do their work effectively without any interruptions, and still have the office environment for those who want it, or the coffee culture type places where you can just work from that kind of environment. Because I know that not everybody obviously will be into co-working spaces, but there's also the opportunity to just work from coffee shops, and co-living places are popping up more and more as well in the region, where you can, if you just want to have that shared experience, you can just opt for a co-living place in one of the hub spots like Bansko, for example, and just co-work with anyone who's staying at the same time. So for sure, infrastructure is becoming more and more advanced, more and more accessible, and I do expect more and more places in the area, in the region, to pop up where people are just moving because of the accessibility, and of course taxes that make it interesting from that point of view.
Yeah. Nice. So yeah, probably exceeds a lot of people's expectations, or surprises them if they didn't have expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why a lot of times people have these outdated views on Eastern Europe, and they think it's this, underdeveloped, slightly questionable region. But actually, when they come in the region, they just realize that actually things have gone up a lot in terms of quality and accessibility. So I really encourage people to travel the region and just explore and see how different their impressions will be from their expectations.
Yeah, I admit I was guilty of this for a long time until I first traveled to Eastern Europe in 2022. And then since then, like, my expectations have completely changed, and any, thoughts that I had before out the window. And I love Eastern Europe and love traveling to Eastern Europe now.
Amazing. Where did you travel back then?
So first time was to Bulgaria,
Cool.
actually. So I visited Bulgaria and then Cyprus as well. That same year I went to Albania, Romania the following year, and Georgia after that.
Nice.
And then this year Hungary for the first time, as well as Slovenia and Croatia. So adding countries, checking them off the lists one by one.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, I wish Slovenia and Croatia did have better taxes, so we can be talking about them as well, because they're fantastic places to live. But who knows? Hopefully tax systems will change in a good way, and people will be moving there more. Because at the moment, everybody is obviously just going there for short periods of time and not really getting locked in the tax system. But yeah, the region is definitely beautiful and it has so much to offer in terms of lifestyle.
100%. To bring everything together, Marchela, if you were to give people advice, whether it's generally about relocating, moving abroad, taxes, or specific to Eastern Europe, what would be the one key thing that you'd want someone to take away from this episode?
Very good question. So I would definitely encourage people to think about the lifestyle that they want to be optimizing for, because I see a lot of people wanting to reduce their taxes, and that's fantastic. But a major part of the conversation begins with actually understanding what we're looking for. Are we looking for a home base, somewhere where you want to spend 6 months or less or more? Or are we looking just for a place that you can spend the least amount of time possible and almost have a tax home without having like an actual home? Because that honestly transforms so much the conversation around what options are suitable and what options will be a good fit. And this brings me back to what the conversation about Cyprus, where a lot of people choose it because they don't want to spend more than 2 months on the island. But if you do want a home base, if you do want a place where you have the community, you want to lay some roots, you want to spend 6-7 months of the year, then the options definitely become like far more actually, because a lot of countries do ask you to stay 6 months of the year to become resident. But also your requirements as an individual would change naturally because you'll be spending more time, and so you will have far more requirements of the place where you're going to be based. So I think number one thing is just have a really clear idea as to what place are we looking for. Are we looking for a home, or we're looking just for a paper sort of tax base where you don't necessarily want to spend too much time, because that changes the conversation drastically. And once you know that for yourself and what kind of lifestyle you want to have around it, definitely explore all the options, because any option that works for one person, or for you, or for a friend, or for a sibling, whatever, it's just 100% not going to be the right choice for you. Because what I've learned from so many years of doing this is that every single person has their own like very unique goals, requirements, and preferences. And fitting someone to a few different options is always going to be a recipe for disaster. Because what I geek out on a lot is this idea of really finding a place that's going to work for the longer term. Like I don't want to set my clients in places that will really going to last them for 1 or 2 years, because they're just so because I really want to make sure that the places where we're going to, where we're moving to, really is tied to what they're looking for and their lifestyle. And it's only really once you dig deep in all of these sort of unique requirements and goals can we really find those options that will not just last for 1 or 2 years, but are really going to be there to stay for at least 4, 5, 6 more years to come. Because that's when you really start to get a massive return on that investment, both in terms of obviously cost, tax savings, but also just peace of mind of not having to do this change every couple of years, because obviously it takes a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of energy, and the more you kind of spend analyzing what you actually want and why you want to make the change, it's when you really can make lasting decisions that you're not gonna want to even change for the long foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think it is becoming harder to plan longer term in the uncertain world we live in, but it's definitely nevertheless good advice from my perspective. And I think there are many countries within the group that we talked about today from Eastern Europe that we could say, you know, they at least appear to be generally stable over the long term. Yeah.
For sure, yeah, for sure. And that's why it's just so important to keep an eye on the developments and honestly gauge the history to what's potentially going to happen in the future. So for example, Estonia is a very classic one where they attracted so many people, but year on year they kept on changing their rules. So, you know, now they're changing the tax rates from 22 first from 20 to 22, now from 20 to 24. And so you constantly have that change where the government is obviously looking to change things like going forward for a number of years. And that's why, as much as Estonia has been like super popular, I almost never recommend it, because there's just so much uncertainty. Like, and we see that the government is just brewing all the time things to change. Similar to Romania, to be honest. Like they've been on the tax system for so long, and they just keep on working on it. They keep on doing change after change. And so looking at the history can definitely tell you more or less as to how interested the government are to really change the tax system. And based on that, you can more or less see what you're comfortable with in terms of stability, and gauge from there whether it's a country that you want to keep at bay and not really dive into, or actually it seems pretty stable and you can go ahead. Like for example, Cyprus, Bulgaria, Malta, I mean even Albania to some extent, they haven't changed anything drastically in years, and there's no interest really in doing that. So in the region, there's definitely countries that are pretty stable, that can be extremely interesting. So definitely worth exploring.
Yeah, great. Well, Marchela, this was a great discussion. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Before we end, there's always a fun question at the end of these episodes. So your fun question is, what is your favorite city in your native Bulgaria and what makes it special?
Yeah, that is actually an easy one, and I kind of gave it away when I said that I'm in Bansko. So definitely Bansko, definitely the place that I'm currently located, because it's just got everything for me. I'm a very big mountaineer. I love hiking. I love being outdoors as much as I can. Every weekend I'm in the mountain, like somewhere summiting a peak. And so for me, just having that proximity to the mountain is what calls my heart in a big way. So I also love that it's just so close to the water. So whenever, you know, I just want that change of scenery, I just drive my car down to Greece, to the coast, and I get that sea fix. But also, and actually, like I mentioned before, most importantly is the community. I absolutely love people who keep on coming back here. The community is so beautiful, so strong, so growing, of people who are just so like-minded, entrepreneurs in most cases. And I just love connecting. I love connecting with people who are just so similar in a way. And it just provides this feeling of home. Yeah, for sure. It's a place where I feel very, very calm, very, very at home, very satisfied for my lifestyle and of course my taxes. And I highly recommend people checking it out.
Amazing. Then there you go, guys. Check it out, Bansko. Thank you, Marchela.
Thank you so much, Johnny.
I hope you enjoyed that episode, guys, and found it useful and informative. Remember, if you'd like to support the work that Millennials with Money does, you can do so by becoming a channel member or by signing up on Patreon. And as a thank you, you'll get access to exclusive content and benefits as a thank you. With that said, till next time, I'll see you on the next one, and let's get this money.